practical tips to stop hackers on this week's Medical Economics Pulse.
It is almost guaranteed that at some point you're going to be involved in a hack, whether it's your organization or an organization you use. So from that perspective, I'd agree it's inevitable, but it's not inevitable that every single organization will be.
Cyber theft of medical records is a major problem. The good news is hackers need your help to get in. The best cyber defense is a vigilant staff that's well trained in how to respond to threats and not suckered by the tricks hackers play to breach your defenses. Our own Silas Inman sat down with cybersecurity expert Kevin Johnson to discuss how physicians can go about training their staff to best defend against the cyber threat.
All right, well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So looking at the big picture, getting hacked, is that just something that's inevitable? Is it going to happen?
We hear that a lot. I think, I hate the word inevitable, right?
Sure.
I don't think it's inevitable. It is likely. Does that make, right? Like,
Sure.
There's lots of attacks out there. Some are targeted. Some just go against lots of people. It is almost guaranteed that at some point you're going to be involved in a hack, whether it's your organization or an organization you use. So from that perspective, I'd agree it's inevitable, but it's not inevitable that every single organization will be.
Sure. So what are some of the things that are out there that you need to defend yourself against?
There's lots of specific attacks, right? We can talk about, buffer overflows or get into the technical weeds. The reality is that most attacks that practitioners need to focus on are social engineering and malware. Right, malware / ransomware. Right, they're related to each other. All of the rest of the attacks tend to either be related to one of those two, or a one-off that stinks and is awful, but the people who manage your system should be fixing that for you, right? Patching your machine, right? That's why when your Apple or your Android phone says, "Hey, there's a patch," you should apply it. Right. But as long, right? But social engineering and malware / ransomware are the two big ones, right? Ransomware, malware, I think most people know it's software designed to do bad things, right? It's going to attack you. Ransomware is the one that scares most people because it immediately breaks your system and then demands money, right? Like, pay me and I'll fix this sometimes, right? Yeah. I think the FBI statistics are that only 20% of people that pay the ransom actually get their data back. So paying's not the right answer, but so that's the one. Social engineering, it's really just tricking the user to do something. Right, and sometimes that's tricking the user to click a link. Sometimes it's tricking the user to run a piece of software, or having the user do an action like transferring money to an account. Or the one that I've always laughed at, and I don't mean to be rude, but I find it funny that people fall for this. You'll get a message that says, "Hey, you owe money to the IRS. Go get an Amazon gift card, and we'll accept that as payment." How do people fall for that, right? Yes, the IRS has started running on Amazon. It's awesome. So,
AWS is taking over the world.
Yeah, AWS is taking over the world.
But in the grand scheme of it, so if I'm a physician's practice in Idaho, let's say, what do I do? How do I test how vulnerable I am? What do I do?
So the idea behind it is, one, you're vulnerable, right? The two main attacks I said. I don't care what controls you put in place. I don't care how much effort you put into this, how much you spend. An attacker who wants to get in is going to trick people to do it, right? Stupid example, but one that we actually talked about earlier today. I own a FedEx uniform, right? As an attacker, I went on eBay and I bought a FedEx uniform. And I do it with permission, right, when companies hire me to test this, but I'll put the FedEx uniform on, walk into a practice with a couple empty FedEx boxes, talk to people, and steal things. And I slide it in the FedEx box and I walk out, right? Did you catch me? Probably not, right? So what we say is, what you want to do is, there's lots of things they want to sell you. There's lots of, oh, you got to buy this product or that product. Really, the biggest thing is stop doing some basic behaviors that people do. Reusing passwords and sharing accounts, right? There's one account that all of the front desk staff use to log into the computer. Okay, don't do that. Everybody should have their own account. Everybody should only log into their own account. They should not share passwords. Find out who is responsible for your systems, right? For a lot of physicians, they don't know, right? Somebody else in the office manages that. Somebody else is responsible for that. And sometimes that's a big company, right? We've hired this company to manage our stuff. Other times it's, I bring it to the Genius Bar and have them fix it, right? Or it's a friend of a friend of a friend, right? But figure out who that is. Figure out who is responsible for your systems, and then find out what they're doing to protect you, right? Because while it's important for the physician and the office staff, the nurses and the PAs and everybody, it's important for them to be aware they're a victim, that they're a target, that somebody could come after them, but they're not going to be fixing the computers. They're not going to be locking things down, right? So as long as we keep the staff aware there's a target, and then we have the people responsible for the technology, locking it down and managing it, you're better off than most organizations. The final thing I would say is, when you find out who that person is that's responsible for your system, find out if they're doing backups, right? And that they have verified that they can restore from the backup. Okay? And the reason is ransomware. Ransomware comes in, there's a very good chance, I won't say it's inevitable, pretty dang high, that you're going to get ransomware at some point in your career. Okay? You're going to be tempted to pay the ransom, you're going to be tempted to be done with it. It's not the way to solve the problem. The way to solve the problem is to restore your system from backup. If you have backed up your system on a regular basis and verified that those backups work, right? Ransomware is done. Right? You come in, hey, you're going to wipe my system? Ah, well, you wiped my system, and I rebuilt it, right? As long as you have those backups and the backups work, ransomware is not a problem. When you hear about the big outbreaks where it's like, oh man, the hospital shut down for 2 weeks while they recovered their systems, the reason was they didn't have backups of all the systems. And so a lot of those systems they had to build new, right? And act as if it was a new system. So that's what you really have to, that's that last piece, is to have those backups.
Right, absolutely. So you talked a little bit about dressing up in the FedEx outfit and coming in. What types of organizations should take that step of hiring someone
everybody?
Like you?
No. I actually don't think most organizations have to go to that level, right? There is a requirement. HIPAA, High Trust has this requirement. If you accept credit cards, PCI has this requirement. Many insurance companies require practices to have this requirement, and that is to understand where your vulnerabilities are. Okay, so while you don't need to, I'm a greedy capitalist, I'd love you to hire me to do that. You don't need to hire me to do that. What you need to be able to do is to say, do you know what systems are vulnerable, what things are? And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. I want to be very clear, it's part of my job, so I'm not trying to advertise something. But there are companies and software that you can get that will scan and assess your systems. Again, remember that conversation about, hey, find out who's responsible for your systems? Find out if they're already doing it. There is a chance they are, right? That they're already testing for this kind of stuff and verifying it, right? Now, for the FedEx idea, the physical, I'm in your building, I'm tricking people, I'm calling up your staff on the phone, that really, while we can test for that, and don't get me wrong, people hire us to do that all the time, in most cases that's a waste of money. And the reason it's a waste of money is your staff are gonna fall for the attack, right? If I try hard enough, I'm gonna convince them that they need to do what I asked them to do. So what we say is, instead of hiring somebody to dress up in a FedEx uniform and come in, right? Instead of doing that, what you should do is talk to your staff. explain to them this stuff. Maybe show them this video, right? Right? There's lots of stories and examples of people breaking into buildings and doing stuff. So make them aware of it, right? Many organizations will do like an annual security awareness training. The problem is most of them do some cruddy, checkbox thing like, oh, don't click links, right? But they don't actually tell them why. Talk to them why. Explain the risk. Like it's not just don't do this because I told you not to do it. One of the things I find very useful, and we've worked with some practices to set this up, is to, you already communicate with your staff on a regular basis somehow, whether it's talking to them as you walk around, whether it's an email you send out every Monday, I don't know, whatever, right? Start adding things that you've read about other organizations that have been attacked. Hey, did you see that the ransomware that hit so-and-so or whatever? Talk about it. Make it part of the conversation. And by doing that, people will become more aware, and then people will take that pause to think about, wait a minute, is this something I should do?
Sure.
Make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. So we talked about a few things that you could do there to kind of, as a cyber defense protection. What would you say is number one most important?
I think the number one most important is it's either a toss-up between backups and awareness. I'm not sure which one I would say is more important. I lean toward the backups. And I lean toward the backups because people are going to make mistakes, right? We all make mistakes. I've thrown water bottles without the lid completely attached, right? How many times you picked up the ketchup bottle and shook it, right? And we all make mistakes. It's going to happen. I'm not that smart a person, but I'd like to believe I'm halfway decent, right? But I'm still going to fall for stuff. So I lean toward backups being the most important. Back up all your systems, make sure you can recover them. That second part is the most important part of that. It's not enough just to back up. Make sure they restore. And then I would go with the awareness.
And you've touched on this some, but human error, how much does human error contribute to this whole thing, or is it the whole thing?
It is the whole thing. It may not be your human error. It may be the error of the person who set up the system or the error of the, but everything is human error. Verizon does a data breach report every year. And they've not released the one for this year, but last year's report said that 93% of the breaches they worked were caused by a user falling for an attack. Phishing, right? 93%. Wow. That if users started paying attention to what they're doing, and notice I'm not saying, oh, those dumb users, right? Like we hear that all the time. People are stupid. No, they're not. They're doing their job, right? They're just trying to make it through the day and collect their paycheck and accomplish what they want to accomplish, right? But 93% of the attacks Verizon worked, right, as an incident response, were caused by humans doing something wrong. So. A lot of it.
So let's say in the event that something does happen, you click the link, your screen goes black, ransomware, you go, oh no. What is the first thing you should do?
Stop. Right? Totally stop. One of the things I tell people is the biggest damage, and we're going to quote crime shows now, right? But it's never the crime that gets you in trouble, right? It's the cover-up. Right? In this case, it's the same thing. Way too often we see, right? Hey, it seems that you got hacked a while ago. Like you've had ransomware. We've talked to people. They'll use a computer. It'll go black. It'll say, get the screen up that says, hey, pay us this ransom. And they'll be like, I can't tell anybody. And they'll shut off the monitor and they'll start using another computer. I was actually at an office. I was not there for my job. I was there. I have really bad headaches. We're trying to figure out what's causing it, but more information than you need. So I'm going to lots of different doctors' offices as I go through tests and stuff like that. I'm actually at a doctor's office where one of the people behind the counter is like, hey, why is that computer off? And the other guy behind the counter said, oh, it's broken. It doesn't work. And the person turned on the monitor and it had the ransomware screen on it. And the guy had fallen for ransomware like the day before, and being like, oh, I can't tell anybody. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get fired. And so he turned off the monitor and just started using the other computer. And I'm sitting there going, how did this happen with me standing here? Like, what is the chance? So we see too often that people are afraid that they're going to get in trouble. And maybe you will. I don't know. Maybe you work for a jerk doctor. I don't know. But the biggest thing is the cover-up. They hide it. They don't talk about it. Or they go to the doctor or the office manager or the doctor did it. That's the worst. When the doctor falls for it, they never want to tell. It's like, come on, right? Like, we're not going to respect you less because you fell for some attack. But they won't tell anybody. The attack will get worse, right? It'll start spreading. It'll start, right? And then when they finally do say, when it gets to a point where they can't hide it anymore, right? Then they'll go to their IT people or the, Joe's cousin Nancy that fixes the computers. And it'll be like, hey, this happened. When did it happen? I don't know. What's going? I don't know. Talk about it. Hey, this happened. We got to fix this. Help. So one of the things we say immediately is with ransomware, because our recommendation is not to pay, right? You don't care what the message says. It doesn't matter if they're asking you for Bitcoin or Walmart gift cards, right? Shut the computer off. Shut it off. And people will say to you, but sometimes there's a way to decrypt it. Yes, there are, but you have backups, and your backups don't have this problem. So even if you decrypt your files, get your files back, there is still a likelihood that that piece of ransomware is still waiting on your computer. So even if you get the files back, you should wipe the machine and restore from backup. That's why we're harping on that so much, right? So if you get hit, shut it off. Pull the plug, turn it off, do whatever, right? And it'd be like, oh, do I have to do the shut? No, just power it off, right? Because nothing you want to do with that system right then is going to work. And then tell somebody there's a problem and have them restore it.
And what about, there's insurance out there now for cybersecurity. Should most practices get cybersecurity insurance?
My insurance agent is going to hate me. No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
And the reason I say no, I have cyber insurance, right? And do you know why I have cyber insurance?
Why?
Because a customer made it a requirement to do business with
Okay.
I had to have cyber insurance. Every cyber insurance policy I've looked at, and I want to be very clear, I'm not an insurance provider or advisor, so this is not insurance advice, but it's my opinion. Every cyber insurance policy I've looked at, and I've looked at a lot, have clauses about what you have to do for security to get a payment out of it. Right? So unless you're required by some partner or customer or some reason that says, hey, your business is going to make more money if you buy this cyber insurance policy, in not almost every case, in most cases, small practices, cyber insurance is an expense with no benefit. Okay. As you get bigger, as you start to deal with stuff, that equation changes, right? And if you're going to look at that as a bigger practice or as a hospital, do that. Talk to somebody who's an expert in insurance, though. Don't just, one of the mistakes I've seen a lot of people make, and I'll admit it, I made it, right? When I went for my first cyber insurance policy, we just went back to the same insurance company that had our professional liability insurance, our general liability insurance. And what we found was that we needed to shop that around a little bit more. One, for cost, but two, also for what they would cover, right? For example, biggest attack we talk about, ransomware. Most cyber insurance policies won't pay out for ransomware.
Right.
So they don't help with that. So yeah, I know it's not great advice because the insurance companies want us to.
Right.
So,
yeah, but it sounds like a certain size, though.
Certain size, absolutely. But the problem is, here's what happens. It's kind of like if you throw a match into your house and burn it down, your homeowner's insurance is not going to pay you back for that house because you didn't do the right thing to prevent the fire, right? It's the same thing with cyber insurance. Unless you can show that you've done all these other things for security, they're going to say, well, no, you weren't doing the right thing. And that's the problem for the very small practices, why it's a waste.